Welcome back to Chapter 1, where we discuss movies, books, and music, and we dive into their relationship to the human connection and life. We like to get emotional here about a lot of things, so if you're into that too, stick around. Today we're talking about Dr. David R. Hawkins' book, Letting Go. This is a big one. So this book is life-changing, life-altering. This will change your perspective on so many things if you allow it. And luckily I did. I picked it up when I was going through kind of a rough time with a family member. There was a lot of feelings of betrayal and confusion, and I was just really lost around what had happened between me and this person. And I picked this up out of a recommendation from someone I think that I follow on social media or something, because they were talking about how it is a good guide to considering releasing certain emotions. And it is. This book has helped me through so many times of uncertainty, times of absolute joy, times of total confidence, everything. It's a really good book. I highly recommend it to you no matter where you are on your path, just because it has opened my eyes just a little bit more to what life has to offer and how I connect to the people around me, which is super, super important to me. So this book is laid out in an interesting way. It's about 350 pages long, and essentially what it does is it goes through each of the emotions that we experience throughout our lives and the range of emotions and all of that really interesting stuff. It has about 10 chapters, each dedicated to a different emotion, and each one outlines a different example of said emotion and how that emotion can actually be looked at from a different perspective. And that I would say is this book's entire message, is to sit down with yourself, look at the emotions that you're feeling about whatever you're going through, and identifying what they are and deconstructing them to allow yourself the space to feel them, essentially. I think that is such a helpful perspective, because in past years, I've really allowed certain emotions to kind of just take over me and lead my life, which I don't love anymore. I really don't want to be a product of an emotional response to whatever I'm going through, which is really, really hard as a human being. It's so easy to go down a jerk reaction path, and sometimes that is absolutely necessary too. I know I'm being contradictory here, but I understand and accept that emotional responses are entirely human and beautiful and should be respected. In my personal belief, a harsh emotional response should be tended to in a delicate way. I'm speaking about the more quote-unquote negative emotions that we see in the emotional spectrum. Now I believe that reacting in a negative way should be kept to yourself. Not for its entire lifespan. I think the initial reaction, if you are getting angry, it may just need to be tended to a little bit more carefully, which is also really hard, and I understand that that's extremely hard for a lot of people. In my lifetime, I've experienced anger from people where I can see it kind of just take over their entire being, and at a very young age, I decided that I did not want to put any effort into being angry, especially if it was targeted at somebody else. And I never wanted them to feel the way that I had felt as a victim of somebody else's anger. It's always a tough place to be, and at a very young age, I decided that I did not want to produce that kind of energy and put it out into the world. So I have a weird relationship with anger because for a long, long time I did not respect it. And I just kind of didn't allow myself to feel it, which is also not healthy. It's not healthy to be, in my opinion, it is not healthy to be on one side of the spectrum or the other. I think you need to kind of float in the middle. And that's how I like to look at a lot of things in life these days. Probably thanks to this book. So David R. Hawkins has a PhD and an MD, and he has actually a ton of books just like this. Not just like this, obviously, they're different topics, but he has a lot of stuff on consciousness, and this dives into that a little bit, which I'm a total nerd about these days. I really love the idea that we are all just connected and are not physically one being, but I think that our brains all operate on a similar kind of path, and I think we're so much more alike than we actually think. But we are all individuals as well, which is also extremely beautiful. I think that balance, again, that gray area between those two ideas is where I like to sit these days. And this book definitely inspired that. So I read this when I was having a really hard time with my family member, like I previously stated. And it really helped me to just kind of process the things that I was feeling. It walked me through sitting with them and really letting the emotions take the wheel. I did not do this with anybody else. I dedicated a lot of time to being alone and feeling these emotions because they needed that respect. And my perspective on it now is that if you don't give those emotions the stage, they're just gonna come back tenfold. And that's not good for anybody, including yourself. So it has definitely helped me understand why that's important. It has helped me come up with a process for really slowing down and looking back at the emotions that I'm feeling about anything, whether it be positive or negative. Having that process and the structure for pulling myself out of an emotional reaction, an emotional in the moment reaction, I guess, has been so helpful and helps me personally stay more present. Because when you can recognize kind of a knee-jerk reaction emotionally in the moment and then not act on it and just kind of put it in your back pocket for a moment and go, oh, there's something there. There's something there that I need to think about and consider and allow. That is so empowering. It is so overwhelmingly confident. I absolutely love it. And I'm not saying that I'm a master at this, but I hope to be one day. I think it's so helpful. And that does sound an awful lot like pushing your emotions down, doesn't it? In the moment, of course it is, because you're going, oh, I'm going to put this in my back pocket. I'm going to put it on the shelf. I'm going to do whatever your metaphor is. And I'm going to deal with it later. But then the biggest difference between pushing it down and traditionally, as we know it in society, and this process is that like you actually go back and commit to yourself and commit to your well-being about processing these emotions, which I think it's just so important to me. And obviously everybody has a different process with this, right? I like to meditate and then either journal or go for a walk so that there's like a physical action as much as there is a mental action for each of these emotions. This book, so the first time I read it through, obviously it helped me through that tough time with my family, and I'm so thankful that I picked it up when I did, because it really, again, allowed me the space to feel these human being feelings and understand why I was reacting the way that I was, and it helped me understand why my family member also may have reacted the way that they did. And truthfully, it helped me get to a place where I could sit down with this family member and speak on what had happened and walk through that process with them kind of gracefully and peacefully. I liked this book so much that I told myself that I would reread it once a year. And that's where you're finding me right now. I'm probably 85% through the book right now, and I've just been rediscovering it just through a different lens now, because I'm in a totally different place physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. I'm processing this book in such a different way. And it's just, I've said this before in other episodes, that I love when you can pick up a piece of media or content and it affects you differently. And I think that is most media, content, whatever, because we're ever changing and we are never the same person that we were when we first consumed said media. It's kind of what's so special about these things, whether you pick it up again and you react negatively or positively, or you have no reaction at all, I think is just deeply interesting to me, and I see it happen in myself all the time, so I'm sure I'm not alone in that concept at all, which is great. Welcome. We should make t-shirts. Truly. The Emotional Reaction Club. Let's go. So throughout this entire book, I've left little notes for future me, or for people who decide to pick it up and read it, if I ever pass it on to them, because there's some really profound things in here that I related to, and so I just felt the need to sit down and write a little reminder about what in each chapter kind of hit me pretty hard. So in the chapter that goes over desire, there's a lot of talk about guilt as well, which I think, from my experience with the people around me and through my personal experience, is something that a lot of human beings relate to and carry. I carry a massive amount of guilt, not so much anymore, but traditionally it is something that has kind of driven my bus, my metaphorical human bus, in the past. And this chapter goes over certain desires that you have and why you may not act on them, and a lot of the time it's based in fear and guilt and all of that stuff that is relevant to a lot of people. But I had a thought after reading this chapter about guilt and the amount of time that I have dedicated to it. It's a lot to consider when you start to sit down and reflect. It's hard to look back and be like, man, I really did that, didn't I? But what makes it easier for me is accepting that I was exactly where I needed to be. I needed to sit in that guilt and that fear and recognize that it is something that I'm feeling and I don't want to feel it anymore. This chapter kind of brought that up in me, and I left a note here that says, is feeling guilty so important that you would dedicate your life to it? And it sounds so simple, right? That question is one of the simplest things I think I've ever thought. And yet it's so heavy. And the answer is clearly no. And I think it would be for anybody who is asked the question. Is any emotion really so important to you that you would dedicate your life to it? Would you build a shrine for guilt? Would you build a shrine for fear? Would you set up an altar for anger? Like, I'm gonna assume that 9 times out of 10 people are gonna answer that with a no. Yeah, no, I don't think that anybody, when they're in their most optimal state of mind, would ever be like, yeah, I want to dedicate my life to being mad, or I want to dedicate my life to being sad, or, any of it. I think that there's balance that needs to happen. And these are my personal thoughts. I love the idea of things being balanced. So, but yeah, so this book, it has just a few thoughts in it that are really, really interesting and different from anything that I had ever been exposed to prior to reading it, especially growing up. I think depending on your family dynamic, your culture, what happens to you in childhood, who's teaching you things at school and at home, you are brought up to approach emotions a certain way. In my family's culture, where my father is from, he's not from America, he is European, it is not seen as polite to actually speak about your emotions. And they are taught to kind of hold things in and not express things very well. And I think, regrettably, that is more popular than it isn't. Because we are, unfortunately, brought up to be so considerate that we don't want to bother other people. But as I'm saying this, that very much feels like a people-pleasing trait. And people-pleasing to me, as a recovering people-pleaser, is, it's hard. That's a hard title to have, because in my perspective now, you are abandoning yourself. When you are so considerate that you are going out of your way for everybody else, that is a disservice to who you truly are. And maybe you're not, you know what I mean? Like, people pleasing has a lot of different layers to it. But in my brain, it is very much like, I'm going to do anything I can to help others, and I'm going to completely ignore my needs and my emotions if they get in the way of me helping this other person. So if somebody asks me to hang out, I'm not in a good mood, I want to say no, but I don't, because I don't want to displease them. That to me is people pleasing. That is something that is, I believe, developed way young. And I'm not a doctor. I have not studied this. This is just stuff that I have picked up over my years of reading and thinking. It makes so much sense to me, because I know a lot of people pleasers, and it's something that they've always had in their bloodstream, and it can be harmful to everybody, because I've seen people who are such dedicated people pleasers that they actually start resenting the people around them that ask for their help or their time or whatever it is. So that's, to me, that's hard to see. I want people to have a space that really allows them to be who they are, and I want people to be comfortable with telling me no, and I want to be considerate of the things that I'm asking, you know. Essentially, I really desire clear, open communication, because I think it's really beneficial to everybody, but I understand that not everybody operates like that, and right now we don't need to. You know, we're all learning and doing this human thing, which I think is beautiful, and we're all individuals, so I feel like I'm just like contradicting myself on so many levels, but I also just am kind of into it. And that kind of bleeds into the next chapter I want to talk about, which is pride. This one is a deep one because it goes over ego and all of it. Ego is such an interesting thing to me right now, because traditionally being egotistical is bad. It's not, in society, it's not a great thing to hold. And I have a weird relationship with ego right now, because I think I'm trying to figure out exactly how I define it, which is fun and different. But I think ego for me right now is the part of me that actually holds me back from a lot of things. This is kind of revealing. But I love it too. I think that it gets in my way, for sure. And I'd love to release it, and I'm working on that. But this chapter talks about ego. It talks about letting go of pride and opinion, which is another interesting thing. Having an opinion. Everybody has a fucking opinion, and they should. They're entitled to. And I actually think people's opinions are what allows me to grow, because people have different perspectives, they have different opinions, and I love digging into what they have to say, because they're from a completely different path of life. Even if we grew up in the same neighborhood, had similar experiences growing up, they still had a different emotional reaction to those things and growing up in that way. So I think people's opinions are extremely, extremely valuable, because they have a different perspective. I think that being extremely careful about what you accept as your truth and the lens that you look at it through are extremely important to me right now. You never know. I could change my mind tomorrow. So releasing and letting go of pride and opinion to really soak in who someone else is, to actually hear them, to know who they really are without my opinion or our opinion and pride getting in the way of that. That's what I took out of this chapter, is to just really let go of the thoughts, the reactions, the curiosities. Well, not the curiosities. I love curiosity. To allow them to be who they are, and then in turn, allow yourself to really let that soak into you and accept it for what it is. And this is assuming that you're surrounded by people that you enjoy and like all of that beautiful human stuff. It's fun to do. I've done it in real time, and it's powerful, and I love walking through the steps of realizing that I'm having a reaction that is hyper opinionated and proud, and letting that go to just let the person be who they are, say what they need to say, and then accepting it for what it is without kind of debating, you know? And I think a lot of conversations these days are charged by debate, and I'm trying to step away from that to allow myself and others to just be at peace and experience life in the moment and for what it is. The next chapter is about courage, which is one of the quote-unquote positive emotions on the spectrum. And it's a couple of steps behind joy and love and peace and all of that good stuff. Courage is huge. It's massive, and it happens every single day. I'm sure it happens every single day in your life. Really, like, slowing down and recognizing where you have courage is so powerful. Oh, I love it. Because you may not recognize where you are being courageous, because you're getting up and you're doing your thing that you do every day. If you're like 98% of the population, you get up, you go to work, you do all of that stuff. And when you do it repetitively, that is a form of courage. Getting up out of your bed, doing what you need to do, taking on your responsibilities full send, that's courage. It is. And I love that. And I actually had a supervisor tell me this one time. She sat us all down and she wanted us to go over what traits we believed that we had and why they were a good addition to the team. Which is such a boss thing to do. Like, if you think about it, sitting down your team and being like, tell me why you're here. Tell me what you contribute. That's badass. Yeah, it definitely stuck in my brain and actually made me relate to this chapter in this book. And one of the notes that I left in here in this chapter was the idea of slowing down techniques when we get quote-unquote comfortable or content. And should we do that? The answer is no. No, you should not. Do not stop doing the things that you enjoy doing because you're comfortable. And I am such a I don't want to say victim. And I am so guilty, ironically, of doing this. Is when I get to a certain point, when I feel good, I'll stop doing certain things. I won't meditate as much. I won't journal as much. I won't go for walks as much. I won't go to the gym as often because I'm feeling really good. So I'm like, why the heck do I need to do any of that if, like, I'm good to go as is? And it's not a good path. You know, I recognize it, luckily, these days, sooner rather than later. And I'm able to get out there and courageously approach those things regardless of how I'm feeling, you know. And that's empowering when it comes to emotions, when you can kind of step away from the bad feelings or the good feelings and go, you know what, I need to do this regardless of how I'm feeling right now because I know that it's good for me and I enjoy it. I love that. No matter what it is for you, if it's reading, if it's napping, if it's listening to music, whatever it may be, don't let those things slip if you have the opportunity. I understand I'm speaking from a place that not a lot of people have access to because people have heavy responsibilities. And I recognize that, but it's a big but. It's so important to stay dedicated to yourself as well, because in my brain, when you're dedicated to who you truly are and you're committed to these things that you enjoy, the energy that comes from your being when you're in that state is so beneficial to the world, to your family, to your community, your town, your state. We can zoom out as far as we want. It's so beneficial. And people feel it. People feel when you take care of yourself. And it just, to me, if you're vibrating on a certain frequency because you're doing all of these things for yourself and making time, that will affect the rooms that you walk into. People will pick up on that, and they will also join you on that frequency, regardless of whatever is going on. And if we all dedicated to ourselves, essentially, the time that we need, the world would be wild, dude. It is wild. I meet people like this all the time. I meet people who have massive responsibilities, but they still dedicate a little bit of time to themselves. And it doesn't have to be a lot of time. It has to be the right amount of time that you have, combined with the right amount of time that you want. Balance, babe. So upon this second read through of this beautiful book, and let me be clear about this, I love this book. I do. It is so eye-opening and interesting and such a different perspective. Again, be careful what truths you're accepting and all of that good stuff. There's a lot of opinions in here that I don't vibe with, but I love that they're there still. Through this second read through, I'm in a totally different place in my life, as I stated previously. And I am now aiming for a lot of peace in my life because I've been able to access that peace and I know what it's like, and I want to stay on that for sure. So while I was reading through this, I had a lot of thoughts. I've been having a lot of thoughts around connection to other people, and I think we spoke about it briefly, probably 15 minutes ago, about how we are all connected consciously and we're also individuals. But this next piece I'm going to talk about is exactly that, and it is in the chapter that's based on peace, which is one of the quote-unquote positive emotions on the spectrum. So in the chapter of peace, the author speaks about this concept of surrendering to ultimate reality. Now, what that means to you is probably very different than what it means to me. To me, it is surrendering to exactly what's in front of you in this exact second. Accepting that and loving it with every cell in your body, every energetic spike in your brain, and everything beyond that. And in this part of this chapter, he goes over this example of this person sitting down and going through this letting go process and really grounding in reality. And ultimately what this person ends up experiencing and realizing is that there is this concept that life, like you and I know it, in these human bodies with these brains and these minds, these magnificent experiences, is just the universe manifesting being an individual. Now, this can bleed into a lot of different things. You can see this from a lot of different perspectives, no matter what you identify with, whether it's God, universe, some people call it source, which I really like, whatever overpowering energy that you believe in. Maybe you don't believe in one at all. That is absolutely fine too. Us being here, I just love this idea of God or the universe or this source energy being like, you know what I want to do? I don't want to be just one being. I don't want to just be one pocket of energy. I don't want to be just one God. I want to be 9 billion of them. And that's life today. I love it. I think because it connects us all, yet it grounds us in our individuality. Because I think when people think about like a collective mind, a collective being, they get a little fearful of what that means to their solo experience. And this idea of the universe being like, you know what? I want to try it. I want to try and be 9 billion different beings, and the trees and the birds and the bugs and all of that. And I just want to know what it's like and what it would be like if I allowed that to happen. And then humanity, and then nature, and then, whatever happens. And now we get to walk through life and reconnect in whatever way that we desire. We get to experience these things. We get to choose, which I think is really, really beautiful. There's a lot behind this. I could talk about this for a long, long time, and I would be happy to, but I'm not going to do that today. I just want to talk about this book and how it has altered my perspective. And that was one of the much bigger perspective alters that has happened lately. This book is really, really enjoyable. Again, helped me discover how to sit down with my own emotions regarding tough times and process those. And I will say that this book was kind of a catalyst, but I also had professional help too. I don't think that there should be any shame around reaching out to others for help. And traditionally, I am not someone who likes to ask for help, but I deeply encourage it to anybody and everybody in my life because it's important. Again, collective. There's something powerful in reaching out to the people around you or professionals for help with this kind of stuff, because this is it. What you have in your mind is so valuable. I truly believe everybody has this like really deep gold energy within them, in their brains, deep down. And I think we're all going through this life journey trying to reconnect with that through life experiences. Life can be hard sometimes, absolutely. It can be really hard. I've had some really dark days, but I think that there is a way through that. Absolutely. And this book helped me through that. And I highly recommend it to anybody that, even if you're going through something good right now. Remember the part where we spoke about, even if you're feeling good, do you continue on with your practices and stuff? Yeah, do that anyway. Read this book. Because it'll probably make you look at those times with curiosity too. I've had a lot of joyful moments where I'm just like, hell yeah, I love this in the moment. Being extremely present is something that this book also promotes. With that said, the chapter on transformation in this book really made me realize that we should ensure our self-worth by whatever means necessary. And I love the idea of gifting that to yourself. That's very Miss Independent of me to be stating. And totally contradictory to what I was just speaking about regarding reaching out to others for help with it, whatever. But yeah, ensuring that your self-worth by whatever means necessary, I think is one of the ultimate forms of self-love. And again, when you're taking care of yourself, people can pick up on that, and you will change the way that rooms feel. You'll change the way that people feel around you. I think if you lead with love and joy, and you're promoting that within yourself through self-love and all that really tender, good, delicious stuff, that, yeah, it's just good for you and for everybody. So gifting that to ourselves, gifting the self-worth we're reaching for through actions that we take upon ourselves is important and valuable. Another massive chapter in this book for me was relationships, and this is not just based on romantic relationships. This is based on familial and friendly relationships too, but a lot of it is a reminder to be present and letting go of emotions, dedication to memories or future projections, whatever. I think that in my experience personally and through my friends, a lot of us tend to live in the past or in the future. And honing in and being truly, truly present and grounded for me has been so valuable and makes me appreciate things massively. I love the idea of nothing existing outside of this exact second. And I love reminding myself of that throughout the day, because it will help you recognize if you want to change things or if you don't. Right now, it's a nice reminder. It's a nice grounder. Being present is so powerful and empowering and really can bring such a shine to life. And I love this. There's this concept in here of assuming is a form of protection. You know, if you assume one thing about someone or another, there's probably a deep protection happening there. Whether it's, I'm assuming this is a good thing or I'm assuming this is a bad thing. There's, to me, some form of protection happening there. And there was with me for a long time. I would make assumptions about other people that were based in fear and ultimately protection. And that was something that I learned, obviously, as a child. So my note in this chapter is just don't assume to protect yourself, because it can lead you down a lot of different not great roads. And ultimately, letting go of that and just being here now is divine. Not to be dramatic, but it is just, if you're aiming for peace in your life and you don't feel that right now, that's okay. I think a lot of people lack that at some point in their life, and I think that a lot of us, maybe not all of us, want that, you know, that sense of peace that, you know, life is exactly what it's meant to be. But yeah, this book has been so transformative for me. I highly recommend it. Dr. David R. Hawkins has several other books about consciousness and human connection, and I think a few on religion as well. I really like the way that he writes. It feels very digestible and applicable to my experience here. So this is basically a reaction to this book, and I'll probably commit to the idea of reading it once a year because it's just so eye-opening and we're changing all the time. So the way that I digest this in a year will be totally different, and it'll be fun to see what happens. But for now, I highly recommend this book. Go into it. My recommendation is to go into it completely open-minded and just go, what if that's possible? What if that is a thing? If you're struggling right now, or, you know, if you're not struggling right now, it could amplify the feelings that you're feeling, which are incredible. Yeah, I can't recommend it enough. It has been a massive pillar in my spiritual journey. I think that whether you're going through a good time, a bad time, a neutral time, it is definitely something to consider. Yeah, so give this book a try if you're curious about any kind of level of consciousness, if you want to reconnect with your emotions, if you want to disconnect from your emotions, if you just want to let things go and lead a life that is packed full of peace, I recommend this book. If you don't want to do that, I recommend this book. Regardless, it's a really good read. Anyway, Letting Go by David R. Hawkins is definitely on my reread list. And yeah, if you like to be emotional and connect on a human level, I hope that we catch you in the next one. Bye.